Hello and welcome back to Him Reads as we continue with Straight On Till Morning. Meanwhile, in another world, but what of the family Wendy left behind? Does time pass in the real world as it does at Neverland? And as it does in the land of the first? How exactly are the three worlds, connected? If it's tea time in Neverland, what hour is it on the east coast of the Americas? What does Wendy's father mean when he says it's gin and tonic time somewhere in this great bloody world? And what exactly are cocktails? Does Wendy family miss her? We shall indulge the reader with the answer to exactly two of these questions, even as we indulge the author in a bit of fourth wall breakage. In the empty, somewhat dark house of the Darlings, it was raining outside. John and Michael burst through the door with endless energy and boundless enthusiasm of two young men. The elder of whom had just aced a botany exam, and the younger of whom had toast and treacle for lunch as a special treat from the headmaster. Also, there were puddles. Michael was soaking, John was trim and dry from the top of his ridiculous hat down to his spats, for he had a large umbrella given to him at Christmas time that he took with him everywhere and called Bella. Bella the umbrella, isn't that just perfect? And maybe it was, the first 12 times. And after that, even Wendy began to grow cross. Wendy, we're home, John called. Where's the tea? I can't smell tea, Michael said a little plaintively. Tea? You can't smell tea being made. I can smell the steam. It's all warm and moist and lovely, Michael snapped, and I can hear the whistle. And if she or the cook has made buns, I can smell those too. Neither hearing a whistle nor smelling buns has anything to do with smelling tea, John pointed out with the wise air of someone much older, and more often than not, a pain in the thorax. I guess we'll just have to make it ourselves, Michael said, completely ignoring his brother's freely given wisdom, as he often did. He poked cautiously at the stove and looked around for a box of matches. Lack of Wendy and how-to knowledge were only temporary impediments in tea time, not permanent ones. Well, where can she be? John asked, now sounding plaintive himself. Old Nana had finally made into the kitchen by this point. She had been slumbering in front of the fire in one of the upstairs rooms, happily dreaming of lying in front of a fire. She chuffed, demanding the sort of greeting an elderly doyen of the household deserved. Nana, Michael hugged her, and the dog didn't mind his wet and muddy paws, the same as Michael never minded hers back when she too was of puddle-jumping age. Have you seen Wendy? Amanda sighed, as if the two boys had been a little more observant of her large, expressive brown eyes. They would realize she was saying something to the extent of, oh, here we go again. You're not going to bother even trying to understand what I'm about to say, but I will try to tell you anyway, because that's what good dogs do. She walked over to the kitchen door, sat down, pointed, looked out the window, and barked once. She's gone out, Michael hazarded. Nana sighed a moist pain of relief. Wendy? Gone at tea time? Most suspicious. That's not like her at all. Maybe she's gone out to buy special treats and got caught in the rain, Michael said hopefully. It's London, Michael. No one ever gets caught in the rain. It rains all the bloody time here, John started off saying amusingly like his father would, but trailed off into something somewhere between wistful and bitter. For the slightest moment, a world had flashed in front of his eyes. A memory of bright sun and blue sea that wasn't a memory at all, but a memory of imagination. There was a palm tree and the smell of coconuts. Without being able to read his brother's mind and yet somehow sensing the mood behind it, Michael took the sort of cerebral right down that the babes sometimes manage when they learn betters cannot. We should get treats from Wendy sometime, he ventured, not coming to quite the right conclusion, but not the wrong one either. Yes, we should, John said uncertainly. The two sat down at the unset table, and the elder boy's mind went to the younger one's couldn't, wondering perhaps it was late for something like treats to rectify a situation they had been stupidly unaware of. Despite how traces of it were pressed in every dark corner of the house, making itself widely known and permanent and sad. When Mr. Darling returned home for light supper before going to his study to get even more work done, and Mrs. Darling finished her book club charity sherry session with the Tevervilles and Miss Pontesquieu, the two entered to a half-lit house and uninspired supper. Wendy rarely cooked unless it was a special occasion, but every occasion had her mark upon it: an extra garnish, a pretty bouquet, a little menu she had written out. But this night the table was set minimally. Napkins thrown on chairs, the lamps weren't trimmed, the leftovers roast, plopped in the middle of the table for anyone to steal or any mouse to nibble, was mostly cold. John and Michael sat glumly in their seats, politely waiting for their parents, not even bothering to sneak an early morsel. John had a book he wasn't reading. "Boys," Mrs. Darling kissed them on each head. "Where is Wendy?" "No idea, Mother," Michael said. "She hasn't been here for hours." "Oh," Mrs. Darling looked Mr. Darling. "Oh," Mr. Darling looked flummoxed. Wendy was never not where she was supposed to be when she was supposed to be there. Has there been a break-in?" "Has someone stolen Wendy?" John asked with a sneer, and a touch of irony that often loomed in an overbright boy with two mediocre parents. "Is that what you're asking?" Mr. Darling frowned. His eldest son had reined in his tone at the last minute, couching in what sounded like genuine surprise. Darling fluffled for a moment, feeling he was being made fun of somehow, but couldn't quite put his finger on it. He wanted to be angry, but Wendy, Mrs. Darling, ever practical, was looking around the foyer. "Her umbrella is here, though her jacket is gone. She couldn't have gone out, or at least not far." "I go outside without an umbrella all the time," Michael said. "If there was fun to be had, you would have gone without your own shadow," John said waspishly, rolling his eyes. The two boys looked at each other, realizing the same thing at the same time. "The shadow," Michael whispered. "It's not real," John reminded him, also whispering. "We should check. We'll go look upstairs one more time, Mother," John said loudly as the two boys hurried away from the table. I pray she doesn't have a fever and lie collapsed incessant somewhere." "That's a bit much," Michael muttered, realizing with a wisdom beyond his years that he would say very similar things to his older brother for the rest of their lives. Nevertheless, united in this mission, they raced upstairs together in the old nursery, which was now John and Michael's room. It had been repainted, of course, and had a new chair, an extra wardrobe, and a neat line drawn down in the middle in chalk, past which Michael's lead soldiers were not allowed to march. The old bureau was there and still had some of Wendy's old things in it. Once favorite toys, bits and bobs, sewing notions. The top drawer was stuck, as always happened, in the damp water. John had to wrestle with it down until it finally flew open, sending him backward to land on his bum. Michael ran forward to look in. "It's not there," he said, and all rustling around the door, ignoring the pin and needle pricks from the untidy pin cushions. John rose up behind him without the usual complaints that should have come from such a pratfall and acted on his serious scholarly body. He, too, poked around, albeit more hesitantly. There was no shadow to be found, not even in the silken bag and wrapper she sometimes kept it in. "Was it ever really there?" Michael asked, in perfect innocence. "I don't know," John admitted. On the other hand, Mr. Darling didn't want a scandal that could jeopardize his position in society or at the firm. On the other hand, neither he nor Mrs. Darling was entirely immune to the stories of Spring-Heeled Jack and the dreary, mysterious gray fogs of a London spring. The police were quietly notified, though the Darlings were quietly notified back. Young unwed girls had tended to show up again, hale and hearty, if often wed, or at least with child. And no bodies floating Ophelia lied down the Thames recently. The police weren't concerned. Mrs. Darling didn't believe it was a boy, at least a boy they knew. Whether or not she was the best mother, as John, Michael, and Wendy believed, she was good enough to know her daughter. Wendy, being a strange kid, was not interested in any boys that way, except for maybe the bookstore's nephew. She'll come back. It's probably all just being a void sent to Ire. Mr. Darling began. Too late. He saw Mrs. Darling's panicked eyes and shaking head. Sent to Ireland? John asked sharply. You were going to send Wendy to Ireland? Why? For how long? Michael demanded. We just felt like your sister needed a break, the mother said gently. Rid her head of fairy stories, the nonsense she continually write down in that notebook of hers. Mr. Darling blustered, angry being caught out, angry that he ever had to hide anything. You wanted to send her to Ireland to get rid of the fairy stories, John said. Let me get this straight. The land of... Bear with me. Daoween, Sidney, and the Bean, Sidney, and the Puka. Now look here, John. You're sending Wendy away because of her stories? Michael shouted. Did you take her notebook? Did you read it? Michael, we're her parents. You have every right to read. But then you know she's ever so much better than Beatrix Potter and Robert Louis Stevenson. But those are... Mrs. Darling began, but maybe even she wasn't sure what those were. Something went out of Mr. Darling. He collapsed onto his chair, head in his hands. And so Darling House continued on a state of uncertainty and gloom. No one would make a mistake or a problem. But the problem presented itself whenever there was a button to be amended, or Nana sighed, or meal after meal assignment and somehow unsatisfying. Despite the cook and scullery maid, the house seemed darker and dirtier. Groceries weren't bought, objects were misplaced, clothes growing ugly. No one hugged Mr. Darling in the special way daughters did. No one felt speechless at Mrs. Darling dressed or asked her to use her perfume. And no one wrote stories anymore. There you see, everyone was perfectly miserable. And for each day that passed in the real world, a day passed in Neverland, more or less. Though you probably have guessed that because of the busyness of Peter's shadow going missing for so long. But tell me this, since you're such a clever reader. If Wendy ever does arrive back home, changed or unchanged from her adventures, will life go on before? Do you really think that's possible? The Darlings were beginning to think not. That's the end of that chapter. See you later.